Good morning, Salt Lake City. Hey, this is April Benincosa, and I am here to introduce a very special guest, our co-host, DArcy Benincosa. DArcy has always been my mentor, and she is a trailblazer for our family and for so many in her world. Everybody who meets her just wants to have a little piece of DArcy. They want to go to coffee with her and meet with her. And even my clients who follow her on Facebook, it's kind of upsetting sometimes. They're like, so how's DArcy? I'm like, you've never met DArcy. They love her so much, and she is an amazing storyteller, and she has an amazing story to tell. She went from being a school teacher to traveling all over the world in almost every single country you can imagine, living there, teaching there, speaking French fluently, enlightening people all over the world, and inspiring and encouraging women especially to live the life of their dreams, to follow their path, to live their plan A life. This is what DArcy teaches. This is her zone of genius, and she has since started her coaching business, which has taken off just incredibly, and she's changing people's lives all over the world and helping them to empower their lives. So with great love and admiration, I am super pleased to present DArcy Benincosa. DArcy, we are here today, me and the listeners, to get answers from you about what is the secret of life.
I'll never tell.
Okay, we'll start with something less serious. So you used to teach school, huh?
I did for 14 years.
14 years.
14 years!
It's a long time. What did you teach?
I taught, over the years, I taught English, journalism, drama, directed musicals, taught filmmaking, and so many other facets of the arts, really.
And was it just not satisfying enough for you? What caused you to take this journey, take this leap, take all the money out of your 401k to start a different business, completely different than teaching?
I think because that's what my degree was in, that I didn't know I could do something other than that. And during my 20s, I was really obsessed with getting married, although I kept moving to other countries and not finding any dateable people. So I was a little bit of a paradox. I think I've always been a grand adventurer, and teaching English actually enabled me to travel and teach in Korea. And I went to Brazil. I lived in Ireland for a bit. I lived in Paris. I lived in Switzerland. So there were so many places open up with being able to teach English, because in the day and age we're in, everybody wants to learn that language. So I became a little disillusioned once Fear Factor happened. So once the beginning of reality television and once cell phones were invented, the entire way that I interacted with my students changed. And it became less about education and more about babysitting and protecting and entitlement. And it was hard.
I remember you coming home telling me stories about how your students demanded an A on their paper, and their parents were not going to donate to the school if they didn't get an A. Did that happen towards the end of your career? That wasn't as present in the beginning? The entitlement?
Yeah, in the beginning, I was just such a sweet little 24-year-old. If you remember, my first job was actually in the ghettos of Florida. I was one of the only white people in the school.
Miss B.
And the kids had never read a book before. I had 9 pregnant students that year. One went into labor, and her amniotic fluid broke and stayed on the carpet all year long. Like, there was an amniotic fluid stain. There were stabbings. There were abandonment of babies. There were so many deeper issues. And I was a 24-year-old Mormon girl who had moved down there because I had a crush on a boy, and that was the only job I could get. And that traumatized me a little, but it was also a very real wake-up call for me. I didn't know that racism existed. I know that sounds so silly. I knew it, but I didn't know it existed in places in America like I ended up seeing. I didn't know that in 2000, which is when I moved down there, or 2001, there were still very segregated sections of Alabama. I think there still absolutely are. I remember trying to go into a restaurant with my friend who was Black, and she just very literally said, "We can't go in there." Like, they will eat me alive, you know? And so that was a huge wake-up call. Teaching was 14 years of just wake-up calls. I think seeing how a culture and how a country raises their children and what the children latch onto and their interaction with a teacher is quite an interesting look at our humanity on a lot of levels.
So anybody who knows you knows that you travel. When they think DArcy Benincosa, they think travel. Darcy likes to travel. What do you think it is that has given you that drive? You didn't grow up in a family who traveled a lot. We went camping into Wendover. And that
if anybody knows Wendover, it's a little gambling town where you just cross the border of Utah and you can play the slots.
Yep.
And they have like $5 strawberry shortcake that is so good. I just remember being young and telling mom and dad I was going to live in New York and I was going to live in Paris. And I think they don't even know how I knew where New York and Paris were. They never showed me a map. I don't even know where I knew that, but I had this deep sense by the age of 4 or 5 that I was meant to live in Paris. The very first biography I read, and I was quite a voracious reader when I was in 6th grade or 7th grade, was Joan of Arc. And I've always felt really similar to her because my name has this weird apostrophe in it, which Americans don't understand. People ask me all the time, why did you put this apostrophe in your name? I'm like, what? I didn't. This is French. Leonardo da Vinci. If you read The Three Musketeers, D'Artagnan, the main guy in Three Musketeers, his name is D apostrophe capital A, because that's a way to say that a person is from a city. So Joan of Arc in French, it's Jeanne d'Arc, D apostrophe A-R-C. And I felt weirdly connected to her. And so I think my name, in all honesty, because it was so different, awakened this sense of France. Because mom would always tell me, because I didn't like my name and I wanted to be named Tiffany, because Tiffany and Jennifer were the big names at the time. And I would tell mom, I want to go change my name to Tiffany or Crystal. Crystal was also a big one that I wanted. And she said...
Then you would have been a stripper.
oh, my other future. Anyway, we won't go there. But, and mom looked at me and she goes, Audra can change her name. April can change her name. But you cannot change your name because you are the only child I let dad choose the name. And she remembered telling dad, she was like, Dave, this is it. This is the one child. You get to name her. Go for it. And I would always ask dad actually to tell me the story of where he came up with my name, because it's daunting for a kid already to have the name Benincosa when you're in kindergarten. And then to have this like D apostrophe capital A thing. And I you know me, I was a huge perfectionist. So I latched onto it and got really frustrated when anybody didn't get it. But I would always ask dad, where did you get this name, Dad? Like, this is such a weird name and nobody's named Darcy. I didn't know anybody named Darcy. This is a long story about my name. I'm going to stop now. But anyway, Dad said he found it in some French name book when he was on his LDS mission. I always think it was a geography book because
I thought he did it when he was in the Navy over there.
No, he said he found it in a baby name book.
So... one other thing about you that I've always kind of wondered. So I'm asking you questions I want to know the answers to. Everybody, I'm being selfish.
What? You don't know every ounce of
I don't. You're really into politics. We did not grow up in a family. I did not even know what a Republican or a Democrat was when I went to France and was a nanny. I remember they asked me, "Are you Republican or a Democrat?" And I was like, I don't know.
And I want to say I'm so proud that you actually know now.
I do. But
because you've come a long way.
Our family is not, I mean, now as our parents are, baby boomers and they're obsessed with Fox News, they're very political. But we did not grow up in a very political household at all.
We didn't grow up in a household with many opinions.
Yeah.
At all.
Yes.
Like I think I would watch movies of these families that would sit around the dinner table and have these big debates or intellectual conversations. And our family was always just pretty chill. I mean, mom loved musicals, which I think, and she loved antiques. Mm-hmm. And she liked a lot of those things. And dad's so simple, which I actually really love having a very simple, and simple can be negative. I don't think it's negative. I love how dad is just straightforward, honest guy, no bullcrap, likes to fish. He will last in a conversation about 10 minutes.
And he wants to watch movies where people get things blown up, and that's it.
And he likes action movies. Because of Dad, I love Die Hard. Die Hard is my favorite Christmas movie. I have a very soft spot for action movies in my life, and you do too, because every time one comes out, we're like, oh, daddy-daughter time, right? So I do think traveling the world helped, because when I moved to Paris at 19, 20 age, I got really sick and I didn't have a work visa. I was living there like 3 months at a time. Then I'd leave, then I'd go back. It's too late to get me on that now, but I wasn't living there legally. And I had to go to the hospital one night. And the way they took care of me, the way they dealt with, and I was trying to remember, they only spoke French, and I just walked up to them, and the only word I could remember in French was pain. And I just said, douleur, beaucoup douleur. I just said lots of pain and pointed to my ear. And I was 20. I was alone. That was my first airplane flight. The family that I was working for didn't help at all. It was 2 a.m. and I said, I need to take the car to drive myself to an emergency room. It took me an hour and a half to find the emergency room in France. And it was crazy. But when we got the bill for it, I thought it was going to be hundreds of dollars, and I was freaking out because I didn't even have insurance. It was $9. I remember it completely. And I thought, what is this? And the family I worked for, they're like, oh, this is socialism. And I was like, what is socialism? I had studied, and then I went, and I was in Paris, I was in France. So then I went to Germany. I went to, Marx's home, and I got to visit the homes of these thinkers who had kind of come up with these ideas. And then when I saw how Europe consumed, I understood capitalism. Mm-hmm. I've just always been a dork who has been you have been the one that people immediately love. You're the life of the party. Everybody wants to hug you. You're open. And I've been the weirdo with the duffel bag in the corner. Just kidding. Not that bad, but I've been the one who...
Why is a duffel bag moving? No, not that word.
We'll never tell. Download. But I've always been more in my head, and you've always been more in your heart. And I think actually some of our biggest conflicts in the last few years with our growth is me learning how to get into my heart and you learning how to get into your head. Mm-hmm. Like you learning some of these things that you're like, oh, I don't want to learn this, I'll just blah, blah, blah. And me being like, wait, so I just need to be in my heart and feel these emotions. And what does that mean? So I think that's where politics came from, because politics was intellectual, and I saw myself very much as an intellectual growing up. So intellectuals can discuss politics. So I learned politics, and I had this realization when I was attending BYU, which for those of you who don't know is a very religious school. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I'm a Democrat. And it was scary. And I went and I looked up young Democrats on BYU campus, and there were 18. That's it. 18 registered young Democrats in 1995 at BYU.
It might be 25 now.
Maybe there's like 25. Well, Utah voted for Bernie Sanders, so I have all the hope in the world.
Awesome. So to go to your switching careers, I know you started taking photos. I remember us doing all of our before and after photos on that little tiny Canon camera with all the yellow filters, which you can't handle now, anything yellow. So it's kind of funny. We got our start only on yellow pictures.
Everybody starts with horrible filters.
Everyone starts with yellow. And I know that you kind of did it as like a hobby. And then I feel like a lot of careers kind of happen on accident. And I feel like your career kind of happened on accident. You took one of your friend's pictures, and then do you feel like it happened on accident, or do you feel the whole time you were a teacher in the back of your mind, you were like, I want to be a photographer someday?
No, never. Do you ever remember that? I just took a lot of travel photos. I loved composition. I loved art. When I lived in Paris, I would go to the Louvre. I had a year-long pass, so I go to the Louvre at least once a week and look at art and composition. I had loved painting, so I'd started painting because our grandmother, Rosa, was a painter. And when she died, I got her paintbrushes, and painting was kind of my thing. And then I realized, gosh, a photograph is so much more convenient and so fast. And this thing but I'd always shot on film. So because I got started late, digital wasn't around. I think, and then I did go through that digital phase when I was learning. I think what I wanted was I started doing money mindset. I started doing a lot of personal growth as a school teacher. And when you start doing a lot of personal growth, you usually outgrow the situation that you're in. And teaching, while it's such a noble profession, the way I was being treated, the way the kids were coming in and just being so hard to deal with, I would just go to school every morning and I started to dread it. And this is at the time when like Apple's coming out with all these things, and I'm listening to inspirational talks by Steve Jobs, who's like, if I wake up too many mornings in a row and I don't like what I'm doing, I'm going to not live my life that way. And I was just getting so many messages like that. But again, I didn't know what I would do. And so because I was a good photographer and it had just been a hobby for a long time and people did start asking me, then I took a workshop around your wedding, so 2010. And I went to that workshop. It was John Canalis's Find workshop. And I saw how John laid out exactly the steps he took to make photography a career.
It was a big investment for you at the time.
Yeah.
Because you weren't really...
Well, I was working in Switzerland that year. So I had a ton of money and I had my own Range Rover, my own $2 million apartment. You never got to see me in that life, but I was doing okay. So I was able to totally just plop down the money for that, even as just like a fun thing to do.
That's one thing you've never been scared about that I've always admired about you. Even if you don't have the money, you just put it on a credit card and you just trust that you're going to invest in yourself and you're going to pay for it later. Like you just know you're going to make the money and you don't mind putting things on a credit card.
Yeah, I really changed my relationship to debt. To mom and dad, it was always so scary and fearful, and our parents declared bankruptcy twice and they couldn't have credit cards and they couldn't even have a checking account after a while. And so when I was putting money on a credit card, I thought, oh my gosh, am I going to be like mom and dad? And then when I realized, no, the things you're doing are investing in yourself. And I had never seen anybody reach a level where I wanted to go if they didn't invest in themselves. So to this day, I have no problem.
Didn't you invest like 50 grand in 1 year?
It was, well, the first year was 25,000 just on a couple of different conventions and networking events. But that really, and then I probably, the next year was another 25 to 30. The year you and I went to Tony Robbins, I spent a ton of money on stuff that year. I always go to marketing conferences. If you get one great idea or you have one chance meeting, you and I have met so many brilliant people.
Yeah.
And I think you can't grow your business from just staying inside your house. Even though I would like to, I love being a hermit. I love staying inside my house so much. I have to get out and meet people. It's the only way the business will grow. Mm-hmm. Only way. So yeah, I have no problem spending lots and lots of money on that. But the funny thing is I'm pretty frugal in other ways. I'm not like frugal, but I'll buy a couch and then I'll have that couch for 10 years. Like this chair that we're sitting on, I've had that since you and I moved in together. I'm just not hard on things. So I buy them nice first, invest, and do it. What did you say?
That's because you never live in your house.
Oh, because I'm never here. Right.
I'm just kidding.
My house just stays pristine because I'm never in it.
I live in hotels all over the world.
I do live a lot in hotels. I will say, like, my car
houses through Airbnb.
My car has had such low mileage the last 6 years because I only drive it like part of the year because the rest of the year I'm traveling. So it's been good.
So one thing I know, so you've been a professional photographer now about 8 years. Would you say that you really started taking yourself
professional
seriously?
2013 when I left.
Yeah.
I think once I took John's workshop, it was the end of 2010. And right around that exact, so I took John's workshop and then I won Marie Forleo's, no, that was 2 years later. Never mind. So yeah, in 2012, in October, I won Marie Forleo's free, like she was giving away a $2,000 scholarship to go to her live event. And I was so nervous because I knew I was supposed to leave my day job, but it was like I needed permission. And so she did this Q&A at the event. And I got up the last day and I was one of the last people to ask a question. And you would go down the people were all sitting and you'd walk down the aisle and there was a microphone standing and Marie was up on the stage with all these lights on her. And I just said something like, I really want to quit my day job, but I'm really scared and I don't know if it's the right choice. How do you know when it's the right choice? And she looked at me and she said, I don't say this to everybody because I'm not good at giving personal advice to people, but you are ready. Leave that job.
That's awesome.
And the whole audience of women like applauded because they knew that I was one of the winners. They had seen my YouTube video. I had to make this 60-second video. Marie knew who I was. Her assistant was so great because I went up and thanked them. And she's like, you had to be here. We just knew as soon as we watched your video, you had to be there. And Marie was like this big, iconic woman. She still is. And to have her just look at me and say, you are ready, leave your job. And I went home, and that's when I quit the job. Yeah. And I just finished out the school year. And that's when I began in earnest. Like, what was that? It was so crazy, but it did give me permission. It's funny when you think, oh, I don't need permission. And then I'm like, oh, I totally need, I did. And she was so led to say that to me in that moment. And it's funny because years later, when I got Macklemore to give me the rights to use his song on when I did the same-sex wedding video, I went down. Utah was surprisingly the first state to approve same-sex marriage. It seems weird that that used to be illegal, right? But it was. And I saw it happening on the news, and I got my camera, and I just thought, if I was getting married today, I would want pictures of this. And I went down and I took all these pictures, and then I took video too, and I edited it together. That's not an easy word to say. And got permission from Macklemore to use Same Love. And all these years later, Marie Forleo, her assistant, emailed me and said, hey, Darcy, so Marie would just like to know, how did you get Macklemore to lend you his song? Because it was hard to get it. I had to go. Yeah. I won't give away my secret. No, I could if I wanted, if we want. But, and I thought, whoa, I've arrived. Marie Forleo asked me a question. Like, not really. Yeah. Anyway, it was a big deal for me. I was like, oh my gosh.
That's awesome. So I think one thing people don't know about you as much as I know about you is that you're really not a photographer at heart, but a writer.
I'm a storyteller, I think.
Storyteller.
Yeah. So I always think that it's going to come out through writing. And I'm quite surprised that I've made such a living doing photography because I pictured myself being a published author by this point. But I've already written a book. You got to read it. I write all the time. I'm filling journal after journal. And I am working on a book right now. But I think photography, I keep thinking like, why was photography important for me to do? And I feel like it was this other element of storytelling in a visual form when I was so used to doing this written form. And it has made me such a deeper, more rich storyteller, being able to master, not that I would be a master compared to many, but to me, like master this space that I have always loved. And what's awesome about a photograph is, right, a picture is worth 1,000 words. I realized, I can be a storyteller through words, but I can take this one image and it can storytell too. So I think what I realized going through the journey of photography was storytelling is the most important thing for me. I'm going to do it through movie making. I'm going to do it through writing. I'm going to do it through photography. I'm going to do it through oral tradition of sitting down and telling our nieces stories. We learned that a lot from Dad when we were little. He would always tell us the best stories. So I think it just was telling a story, telling people stories. And I've just found a lot of different ways to do that.
And body language is 90% of communication. So it makes sense that a photograph is better story, almost even, like more visual.
Yeah, the photograph can really tell you, I think, what you want them to know. And then with a story, the reader gets to imagine it themselves. And I love both of those.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, so what advice do you have for young, new entrepreneurs who are at that point that they want to quit their job? They're really scared. Maybe they have kids to support. Maybe they have a husband who doesn't support them or a wife who doesn't support them. What advice would you have to them to follow their path?
So the first thing I think I would do is don't put the pressure on your spouse to support you immediately. There's this weird thing in life that people are going to tell you no until they see that you can do it. And they're going to say, oh, I knew you could do it all along. So you and I both have a mutual friend, and he is an artist and his father was a doctor. And when he was growing up, everybody told him he needed to be a doctor, not this little drawer, right? Like not this little artist. And then he got hired by Disney and animated Baby Simba. And as soon as that happened, I remember he was a big teacher to me in my life. I've had a long friendship with him. He said that everybody was like, I knew you could do it. You're so talented. I knew you could make it as an artist. He's like, no, you didn't. You told me to become a doctor for the first 25 years of my life. It was only until I made it big that you're like, oh yeah, I totally believed in you. Mm-hmm. And that's the funny thing about people. Yeah. So even spouses, as much as we want to, and there are going to be some whose spouse really believes. You have lucked out. Your spouse has always been so open to you and your growth and everything that you wanted to do. Job. Our parents still don't know what the heck we're doing.
What are you doing with the podcast?
How do you make money? What is this thing?
You should go back to school and get your master's.
What's happening? Okay, are you sure you're okay? Mom and Dad do not get what we do, which is hilarious because we probably make more money than they could ever dream of making. I think Mom and Dad would drop dead if they knew how much money I brought in last year. Or anyway, so one is you have to do the work on yourself first. So you're going to look at everything as if it's an outside influence. Oh, I have children. I have this spouse. I have this job I can't quit. And you're going to make a lot of excuses. And you'll think, Darcy, having a child is an excuse? No, but if you look at a lot of entrepreneurs, they have children and they found a way to make it work. You know, you can just look at J.K. Rowling's story, poverty, welfare, children, and she still found a way to make Harry Potter. And so I think if you, 1, don't involve anybody else, 2, dedicate daily time to working on your own personal growth, and 3, understand what you are supposed to be creating in this world. If everybody's a creator, and if you understand what you're supposed to be creating, you will find a way to make it happen. And it might take a while. And I trust in everybody's journey, but a lot of people don't know what they're supposed to be creating. A lot of people go work the 9 to 5, think this is what I'm supposed to do, come home, cook dinner, watch TV, go to bed, wake up, repeat. And I think that we're in a place of change. I mean, everything will tell you that. All the sponsored ads on Facebooks and all the entrepreneurs that we're exposed to, and every freaking online course that I've bought over the last few years, I'm like, yeah, I will keep buying them because I love learning. So that's the first one. 1, you have to get clarity on your soul's purpose, and that is hard. And that's when, when I was talking about you've been connected to your heart, I was connected to my head. Over the last few years, I do think connecting to my heart made me so clear on my life's mission. And your life's mission can change all the time. You don't have to have the same one every single year. Yeah. It evolves, But mine, our little sister Brooke, just from a young age, we knew her life mission involved caring, protecting, and standing up for animals. Mm-hmm. We've known that. She's showed that since she was born. Yes, she has been the animal whisperer. I have never even wanted to pet a dog until like 3 years ago or 4 years ago when I finally got
still it's
over
like
my
5-minute increments. Okay.
Hey, we can go into my OCD, but I did not like the touch of dog hair. It was a very OCD thing, and people don't get that. I had a lot of compulsive, obsessive behavior around that, so that's why I could not. So mine has always been women, and I think it's starting to become a little bit men. I'm really fascinated by masculine and feminine energy. I'm fascinated by the way men and women come together and how beautiful that can be as a partnership, how much our values as a culture are really making extreme on both of those accounts with masculine and feminine, how products and materialism and capitalism oftentimes wants to exploit those things that make us the most feminine or exploit the things that make men the most masculine. That's probably a whole nother conversation that we can get into. So but mine has always been like education and educating women.
And teaching still, just in a different platform.
Totally. I think I've always been a teacher.
Yeah. So along with teaching, I think came with your love for literature. You were an English teacher. You always were trying to get me to read. I did not read a full book till I was like 20.
None of our family did.
Only read Cliff Notes.
Dad did. Dad
whole
read.
Time, except for my Tony Robbins book.
Shame on you. Don't tell an English teacher you only read Cliff Notes.
I gotta be true. Gotta be true to myself. I also remember you trying to get me to practice my handwriting, which now, when everybody asks me, what does this say, over and over and over, and I'm like, that's my name. It's April.
I did love devoting hours to perfecting things.
You did. You have a high level of perfectionism. I remember borrowing a shirt, mistakenly thinking I could put it back and you would never know. But I didn't color coordinate it properly from light to dark and on the right color of hanger. And you came home instantly. You're like, April! And I just knew. You knew that I borrowed your shirt.
It's
like,
hard to get.
Does she do that?
It's hard to get anything by somebody who knows where every detail in their life is at all times.
But that has helped you. That's why your photos look so good. That's why your attention to detail of story writing and all of that is so good. And I know you always read every time I come over, you have another book and you're talking about another book. And honestly, I don't know how the hell you have time to read at all, but somehow you do. What?
I'm not dating right now, April. Yeah. That's how.
As soon as you get a boyfriend, she's when you read.
No, we just
read
together.
Talk about those books that came to our doorstep.
I just want to date a librarian.
Leaving Mormonism.
Oh, that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, that's our podcast about sex. Everybody, look forward to that coming in a few weeks. Tickle my pickle. Let's just do that. Sorry, Darcy. We're not editing that part out.
Okay.
So, what are some books that have really just changed you as a person that you feel?
The Diary of Anne Frank. It's absolutely one of the biggest books in my life. And the reason why, one, it's one of the most published read books after the Bible.
Really?
Yeah. It's written by a woman, and not just a woman, a young girl. We have so few records of young women talking about this and talking about their lives, about boys, about anything. And then on top of that, they were in hiding from dictators in this war. And she's just stuck in this life. And what is she going to make? So the Diary of Anne Frank I read at a very young age. And it's when I realized about war on a different level. And I realized about imprisonment. And I realized, and I became obsessed after I read the Diary of Anne Frank, understanding this World War II existence. And it was a little innocence lost. I realized this thing called the Holocaust happened, and then from that, I really opened my mind past World War II and thought things like this are still happening. All of us are like, oh, the Holocaust was so crazy. Holocaust genocide is happening in Africa every day, and I always wonder if those people were white, would we care more?
It happened in Bosnia.
In Bosnia and in everything. So I never forget her line that she says, and this is just a few days before she goes to a concentration camp, and she dies 4 days before liberation. And she said, in spite of everything, I believe that people are good. And what that taught me is people are so light and wonderful, and humanity is so amazing, and every person can be dark, and they are darker when they're with other people who support them. So there is a power in a powerful mastermind, right? You and I have surrounded ourselves with women who have built us up, and there is a power in gangs. And you look at what the gangs do, and they wreak havoc and violence, and all under the same preface, all under this, we have got each other's back. And the lightest of us and the darkest of us come from that mentality. And I do think that's why I'm a lone wolf a lot, because every time I go log on to a Facebook group, somebody is bad talking somebody. And that to me is the mob mentality. Oh, I'm behind a screen. I'm not really there. I'm going to call this person this, or I'm going to complain about this, or I'm going to complain about this. And when I personally coach people, I tell them one of the first things you need to do is stop spending time on Facebook groups. You go to the two that are benefiting you the most, figure out how to serve them each week, and then get out of there. Because that will bring your mind down. And the same is true for just scrolling on Instagram, all these lives that you think are perfect. So the Diary of Anne Frank made me realize the power of a woman's story, made me realize after I read it how few women's stories I could find after that, which it compelled me to want to write more of them. It showed me light and dark on a human level that I had never seen before at my young age. And it was the reason that I started keeping a diary, which I think was really instrumental to me having introspection and knowing myself. The day after I finished Anne Frank, and I still have this diary, I got a pattern diary just like she did. And my first entrance is, Dear Kitty, which is what Anne calls her diary. I'm starting this because a young girl named Anne Frank started a diary. And I don't know if I'll ever change the world, but I do know there's power in me writing down even the boringest thoughts that I have. That was my first journal entry. And I always wanted somebody to find it and be made famous because there's always something in me that wants that, I'll be honest.
Note to somebody else out there. I know where it's hidden.
But then ever since then, I've journaled my whole life.
You have always journaled.
I've always written and documented things. I feel like it's really important for us to document our lives, which is why I am a huge advocate for people getting photographs of themselves. One thing I really wish, and you might be surprised at this, I wish when I was 20, I would have freaking gotten buck naked, boudoir, and just documented my body.
Me too.
I mean, I love my body now at 40, but everything I thought was wrong at 20, I look back, I'm like, dang, those breasts just stood up by themselves. They were perfect. Now if I lay down, they roll into just the right position. I'm like, all right, I can make out with somebody in this position. But other than that, I'm like, just right here, just yes. So I really, really wish I would have documented my body. But what I'm very proud of is that I have documented my life very well.
Yes, you have.
Yeah. And for business books, I would say Think and Grow Rich, with a caveat. And the caveat is that these old books like Think and Grow Rich, The Science of Getting Rich, they're written by men, white men in privileged positions who see women a certain way because women were very much in a certain position in society at that time. So I feel like you have to read it with an empowered grain of salt. So I read them because I think it's very powerful for feminine energy to get to the heart of masculine energy. And I think and Grow Rich is the heart of, so is The Way of the Superior Man. I think it's the heart of understanding men. And I think a lot of women just talk to men as if they're other women, and they're not. And so reading that book with my own development of who I am as a woman, I have to filter it through that lens because parts of it can really drive me crazy and parts of it are super entitled. But I do think the foundation of attracting money, wealth, love, all of these things into your life is kind of in the heart of those books a little bit. And they have to be because everyone who I've ever known who's ever made it where I want to go recommends those books. I wanted to read it from a male's perspective to just see, because men were the ones in those positions most of the time and still are on a large scale. But now here we come. Yeah, so those are two of my favorite books.
Well, I love it. Thank you. I am going to reread. Okay, I never really read it. I lied to you. I'm going to read for the first time. Just kidding. I think I read half of it. The Diary of Anne Frank, because I feel called to read that lately. And I always, when I hear that book, and when we've both gone to Amsterdam and seen her house where they hid, and, I always think of you because you did. I mean, I think you just carried it around with you like all the time. I just remember you always had a copy of it in your hand, and you were always like, "You need to read this book." So I was like, that's depressing. I'm going to go outside and play with my friends.
It is depressing. And the first time I went to Amsterdam and I went to Anne Frank's hiding spot the first time, the rest of my trip to Amsterdam, I was absolutely depressed because I'm a huge empath. But here's what I've decided in life. We can't ignore the dark. And we can be light enough to shine out. So if we have to feel a little depression about that to get some deeper understanding, you and I have both felt that. Even today, you were like, what are we going to do about the children down at the borders? We have to do more than just donate money. Like, we're sitting here trying to figure out what role can we play, because we have to step up on a big level.
Marianne Williamson, last week when I went, she came to Utah. The whole thing she was talking about is women need to rise up. They need to tend to all of the world's children. The children that are getting sold into sex trafficking, the children that are getting taken away from their families, not speaking any English. Imagine the terror they must feel. The children getting mass genocide in Africa, you know.
Yeah.
All of these children are all of our children.
They are.
All, and as women, we need to raise the world's children. So
Yes.
I love that you brought that back to end on, because I think that's a perfect message
Absolutely.
about our path and our podcast. The reason for this podcast is to help women to rise up, to help women to stand up and to follow their path and to know what their path is and to make a difference, not just make money, but like change the world.
Passion, purpose, and a big, beautiful paycheck.
Woo-hoo. Awesome. Let's
Thanks,
high five.
April. That was a
Good
great,
job.
great.
Love you.
I love you. Dun, dun, dun.